Hello. And with that, we should be live. Let me know if you can see me and hear me, etc. Hello, Watching the World UK. Hello, Sienna Mobs. Hello, Jasper White, number 3. And Jasper White's 1 and 2, if you also happen to be out there this evening. Apologies, a whole minute late because I was quickly eating some pizza and thought I had everything perfectly set up, and then actually got up here and was like, no, I have not. Or I did, but I'd sort of put things to sleep. Sienna saying loud and clear. Thank you. Always lovely to have some confirmation that things have worked as intended. I'm realizing since doing these streams that I basically own 3 jumpers, 2 of which are grey. Which, to be honest, is enough because they just go around in the rotation in the wash, but that it may give the impression that I literally have 1 jumper. Jasper saying Sienna sent me over all my clones. And McCall here as well. Hello. I hope everyone has had a wonderful week. Apologies for anyone that wanted to watch, see if I was going to put out any clips from last week's stream. Basically, I recorded my new proper video a couple of days ago. So these last sort of 7 days have very much involved just writing the last bits of that video, sort of putting loose ends together, getting bits of costume together, and then actually filming it, which is cool. Hello, Ricardo, Alan. Hello, Clockwork King. Lovely to have some familiar faces, familiar sort of, if not faces, sort of, avatars, I suppose, and ways of typing here. My thoughts for today, we're not going to do, Sienna said, is this going to be an Animal Farm, the video game stream? I'm afraid not. Although, if anyone who was here to play some of Animal Farm, the video game, a few weeks back, wants to sort of see us sort of finish that, we could do that. We could do that in the future. My plan for today was to check out, it's not going to deafen everyone, is it? No. Tonight We Riot, which is a game by I think the studio is called Pixel Pushers Union 56 or something. Some numbers, definitely. And it is published by Means Interactive, which is sort of described as the video games division of sort of Means TV. I don't know if that's because they have long-term plans to put out other games, or whether that's that they were putting out this one. But we will have a look at that shortly. Hello. I think I said hello to Clockwork King already. Hello, Frog Fan. Not a huge amount of frogs, I don't think, on this stream probably, but I'll do my best. And Mattis saying hi as well. Mattis. I was going to say let me know how to pronounce that in the chat, but probably quite difficult to do through the medium of letters. Sienna saying this looks great. Did We're in Hell recommend this? No, I think a few people have recommended it. I definitely saw it. Saw that it was in existence, I think, when it came out, and then sort of never got around to taking a look at it. I've very, very briefly just checked that it would work. So I've sort of seen that it exists. I think it got mentioned in a Lit Crit Guy video relatively recently. Maybe, I'm not sure. Watching the World earlier saying that was this going to be a Dark Souls stream? I'm afraid not. I've never played any Dark Souls games. I also don't really have a way of hooking a proper console up to the stream at the moment. And that's probably not necessarily something I'll do because I'm not actually that good at video games. So this just seemed like an interesting concept to sort of explore, I guess, because it sort of describes itself as sort of a collective game rather than one where you sort of take on the role of an individual, as tends to dominate in most video games. But yeah, we're gonna try it out. Also, if there is any topical events or things that you would like to discuss, bring those up in the chat. It was great last week. I had basically no plan for the stream really. I think I had like one or two things written in a notebook that I was like, oh, I might chat about those, and then I was like, and then someone was like, oh, let's do Political Compass, and I will clip out the Political Compass bit from that video and upload it at some point. But we had a lot of fun doing that for about 3 hours, I think. But so suggestions are also welcome. Oh, Jasper saying, "See, I know I enjoy your streams. I'm from Plymouth." Ah, nice to have some locals in the chat. We also, I was debating talking a little bit about the G7 at some point this evening, but I didn't really have a huge amount to say about it, to be honest. But it's just it's happening locally to me this year, which is interesting, and to Jasper by the sounds of it. And hello, Pedruco. I hope Brazil is treating you well at the moment. I'm glad you have enjoyed some of my videos and that you have learned a few things. A proper like old school, or well, not necessarily old school because it's maybe got some. I've incorporated in some things that I've learned, but sort of an old school format, I guess, in terms of like a proper like What the Theory episode coming out very soon. Well, as soon as I've edited it, basically, which has been fun to sort of return to just doing like a really down the line like educational video. Shashanka Gupta. Hello, and hello, Jacob. Was Luke Pollard's pun on Twitter something about it being plain stupid to get the plane. So to catch everyone who's not in the know up. This is the news that what am I looking for? DuckDuckGo. Sorry, watching the world mentioning Dark Souls had made me want to type in like Dark Soul or something like that. This is the news that the G7 is this year in Cornwall, which is in southwest England, which is like the bit of the world that I come from and live in. But I think it was yesterday. So yesterday it was, and one of the big things of the G7 this year is the environment, because of course it is, because the environment is gonna collapse soon. So one of the main topics is the environment. But it came out in the news, I think yesterday, that Boris Johnson had flown to Cornwall. So for those of you that aren't from the UK, London to Cornwall is, to St Ives is, I'm trying to think how far this is. 5-hour drive, about 300 miles. It says, quicker on the train. Maybe similar actually, because the train's not really quite fast. So maybe it's 3.5 Plymouth to be 4.5 to. So yeah, it might be similar on the train. It's about 5 and a bit hours, 300 miles. But even though going to talk about the environment, Boris Johnson got a plane, and I think it was that he posted himself on Twitter with himself like stood outside this plane, like I've landed, which to many people ridiculous, but also highlights a very real issue in that the transport in the southwest is really bad because we don't have a motorway. So a lot of my PhD, so this isn't going to be super interesting for everyone, but a lot of my PhD was about sort of like political geography and sort of how that's represented through like cultural texts, but how where you are affects sort of what you have, I guess. And it's really interesting to look at some of that stuff on the map and go, in the southwest in the UK, that the motorway stops at Exeter, and after that it's like, so that's like a what in America they'd call a highway, like a really usually like 3 lanes to a road, barrier in the middle. You can go the fastest that you can go on any road in the UK, and then after the city of Exeter, they become slightly smaller A roads, and it's interesting that also a lot of the sort of money essentially sort of stops there as well. But okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to play a little bit of Tonight We Riot. As I said a moment ago, I don't know, a couple of hours ago, I reckon, I very briefly took a quick look and checked that it would like work and stuff, and it seems to, which is good. So, I will give you the sound from it, if I can. Let me know if that is super loud or super quiet. We will talk a little bit about the Iron Lady movie in a bit. It's been a long time since I saw that, but we'll talk about it a bit. Let me know if that's like super quiet or super loud or anywhere in between. So there was a bit that plays whilst you load up the game, which I couldn't, a little too loud, which I couldn't get to come up. It is funky. It is like good. It is like good tunes. There was sort of like Frog Fan saying good for you. I'm glad. So there was a bit that played like when you load the game up, but I couldn't get it to stick around because it just got to the end of it, where it sort of gives you a. I'll turn it down even further. Where it gives you a bit of like an intro to like the world of this game, where it's sort of like a sort of extreme capitalism. Hello, Colonel Communism. It's sort of like an extreme capitalism has taken over. All power is in the hands of the rich, and much as in the chat, a lot of Thatcher chat in the chat. Much a sort of super Thatcherite world, I guess, and we are going. Oh, I'm glad you caught another stream, Colonel Communism. We are going to Riot, I believe. I wonder if I can replay the intro. No, I don't think I can. I don't think I can. Okay. So it gives us like this sort of Mario style map with a bunch of little levels, I guess. Tear gas deployed, riot cops, workers, clash, factory town herald, world 1 of 1. I think this is the bad guy who's like a sort of, yeah, as Sienna's saying, sort of neoliberal utopia. I think this is like the bad guy in the corner, just like, sorry, I'm blocking him. Whippleton. See, okay, press spacebar to continue. And I think I'm like this player 1, and I halt. This assembly is unlawful. And then I think you sort of just like, okay, we've taken them out. I read a quick review which described it as being a bit like Streets of Rage, which I can sort of see. Oh, as long as one of us survives, the revolution will live on. Which I can sort of see those. I can sort of see those comparisons. Can I punch those? Oh. Oh no! Did all my other people die? Oh, I think maybe I have to gather them up as well, like the other people. But they're all dead, so I can't. Come back! I can't quite work out what the situation is with like the other sort of people that were gathered around me and have now disappeared. I don't know whether punching the cars was a good idea. I don't think I gained anything from doing that. Hey, we should be back now. Are we back? That's not what I wanted to do. Catherine Sycor saying hello, which I guess means that we are back. We had a brief bit of technical hitch there, I think. But hello, Catherine. It's good to have you here. Sienna saying my comrades died. I think they did. The music is sort of good until maybe like 5 minutes, and it's a little bit after a while. I assumed it's just Edurome on my end being useless as ever. Edurome in theory is like brilliant because it means that you can, essentially you can have the internet wherever you are in, as long as there is a university around, you can basically, oh cool weapon, you can basically like have the internet wherever you are, and that's obviously quite handy, but yeah, it doesn't always work quite that well. Okay, I think I can throw bricks. It's just interesting in that the sort of appeal of this game for me was that it suggested it was going to work on a sort of that you were going to like sort of I don't know, that it was going to be some sort of like collective play, which sort of interested me, but this actually seems quite just like a normal sort of game. There is no game sound now. I can turn it up a little bit. Oh, or is it here? It should be a bit more now. With the mouse click, left click where you want to throw. Okay. Sort of sometimes works. It's actually quite a difficult game. I've never managed to get Edurome to work, and I used to travel to different unis every fortnight for sports matches. A good trick with Edurome is to make sure that oh, now it throws multiple ones when I throw them. I guess because there's more of us. A good trick with Edurome is to make sure you have your full email address added into your login settings for it, and then it should log in for you. Hey, we liberated an area. Music is very cyberpunky. I've recently been watching video in sort of chunks by Curio. They did a great video about the Cyberpunk game, which I never actually played, but Cowspiracy is coming up. Colonel Communism may be a fan. Was it Cyberpunk 2077? Was that the game? Which I'd never played the game because everyone said it was rubbish, and so I didn't get it. But so they've made a video about it, and it's a really interesting sort of dive into the genre of cyberpunk as well as the specific stuff about the game. It's like an hour and 20 minutes, so I've sort of been watching it in chunks because it's really good, and so I wanted to make sure that I was paying attention whilst watching it. In fact, there's been a bunch of videos like that lately that I've been sort of having to watch in chunks because I want to pay them attention. We're in Hell's latest video about anti-maskers is worth watching, and in fact, We're in Hell will be joining us next week for the stream, which should be good fun. I wonder whether we might have a good chat about the video. It's a really interesting dive into sort of like well, the bit that I've watched so far is an interesting dive into the sort of history of anti-masking in sort of other pandemics, which is really interesting. Kind of communism Securio is awesome. I'm not sure about Cowspiracy. I think I discussed Cowspiracy and my weird feelings towards it and Seaspiracy last week, so I won't bore everyone with that again. Another video which I've really been enjoying is The Death of Economics 101, which is another one that I've been watching sort of in chunks because I wanted to really pay attention to it, which is by Unlearn Economics, and Mexi's in it as well, and sort of talks about how some of those like things about like it's just it's just economics, like how those sort of like basic concepts of economics might not all be as like well-founded as we think, like that they might actually be just sort of things that are so bogged down in the sort of common sense, I suppose, in the sort of Gramscian notion of the things that everyone just accepts rather than necessarily the ideas that are particularly good of the economics world. And so that's really worth a watch. Sienna asking, what did I think about Abigail's new vid? This Philosophy Tube video. Don't want to sidetrack you too much. This was the one about when she's dressed in green and ignorance and censorship. Yeah, I did find it interesting. I love the way the sort of craft of it is as ever really great. I don't think I had any particularly strong thoughts on it. I thought it was interesting. Ricardo saying, I really love Unlearning Economics. Yeah, I've not watched anywhere near as much of the channel stuff as I perhaps should have. But I definitely want to go back and sort of watch through a bunch of it. I don't know if anyone's got any particularly sort of good recommendations for videos to watch. We can always do that in a bit if people fancied. Ricardo saying, am I a moral realist or a moral relativist? I suppose there's an intrinsic sort of relativism to saying it sort of depends on what the situation is, I guess. I think there is sort of probably soft and hard moral realism, moral relativism, I guess. In that, I suppose in any situation, I'm about working out what the applicable contexts are. Not looking at an event in isolation, but going, okay, why is this event happening? But that doesn't mean that you don't have, or that I don't, I guess, have like core things that underlie what I think is right and wrong in the world. I think a lot of those debates tend to actually be about, sort of slightly liberal ideas of having like really clear principles that actually don't necessarily work out in the real world, or are so high-minded that they don't quite come through. Sienna saying she wrote an essay on the rentier economy, and that both Unlearning Economics and Philosophy Tube helped a lot for the sort of basic entry level. ECR asking an interesting question. How do you decide what to spend your time reading / watching and what not to do, just by impulse, or do you do one topic at a time? I increasingly find that what I read, and I mostly read, interestingly, I find that the more time I spend making YouTube videos, the less time I spend watching them, or definitely the less time I spend watching ones that are like super in depth, because I don't know, I guess like I get to the end of the day and it feels a bit like I want to do something different maybe, and I want to watch just some really trashy television. I think I've told everyone in previous streams about I've slightly got over it now, but my previous addiction to the program Below Deck. There is, if you go on, I think it's on Netflix. There's a program called Below Deck, which is a good watch. And I got mildly addicted to it for some time. But I guess I'm sort of led by what interests me a little bit outside of stuff that, a lot of my focus in terms of stuff that I'm reading or watching is led by the video I'm making. Each video that I make takes quite a lot of reading. I suppose the Orwell video involved reading a considerable chunk of the work of George Orwell. This video, which sort of spoiler alert, I guess, is about nations and nationalism and countries, involved reading 5, 6, 7 books about those topics, and also journal articles and stuff as well. And so that took a lot of my time. Ketra Kralik, oh hello, welcome back. I said I recently read a great book called The New Enclosure by Brett Christophers about land privatisation in the UK, which was super interesting and touched on the topic of the rentier economy. I've got plans at some point, possibly this summer, whilst it's sunny and seems like a good thing to do, to make a video about sort of commons and commoning. I know that in my video from a while back, which I was relatively pleased with. I'm gonna Google myself. What was the video that I was looking for? The copyright video. I touch on some of this stuff and use sort of enclosure as a bit of a sort of prism. I don't know if prism's the right word of looking at copyright laws, and sort of looking at sort of the idea of it's very youthful looking me, unfazed by pandemics and the like, but talk about in this video I sort of talk a little bit about sort of the idea of the tragedy of the commons and ideas about property, etc. And so, but I might go back and look at some of these ideas again and just sort of make the videos a bit make them better, make those points better, I guess, and in a better video, which feels a bit like going here's some things I've said previously, but I think it should be interesting. What's it saying? My computer is telling me that my video is is lower than the recommended bit rate apparently, but I don't know how to change that, so sorry if it's a little bit blurry. But yeah, I enjoyed making that video, and I want to explore some of those aspects of that topic differently, and to just do it in a better video now that I'm better at making videos. So I might touch upon some of those ideas. Pedruco saying, my fan of Deleuze and Guattari. I've not really read a huge amount. I should at some point. When I made my video about Freud, that my sort of intention was to do a bit of Lacan and then work my way towards Deleuze and Guattari, but haven't. Oh my goodness! Tom Alexander is suggesting that I should do a video which is a discourse analysis of Tim Martin's Wetherspoon's News magazine. So I think this will be a fun and bizarre story for people not in the UK. Is that in the UK we have a chain of pubs which are called Weatherspoons. Which, how to describe Weatherspoons? I feel like people in the chat need to help me come up with a good description. It's like a chain of pubs which sort of try and have an aesthetic of like your traditional British pub, in that they sort of all have odd carpets, and in fact they all have like unique carpets. That's sort of part of their vibe. They have like a sort of long bar, and let's find like some best Weatherspoons for some images. And they're like ubiquitous. They're like absolutely everywhere. Okay. Like every town has probably 2 or 3 branches of Weatherspoons. Where can they got like a list of, I don't want to go to a Weatherspoons hotel. Find a pub or hotel. Let's go. Let's like pick a random town. It's Leeds. I've never been to Leeds, but they will have many Weatherspoons, I'm sure. There we go. Leeds has 3 Weatherspoons. Where else? Stirling. Is that in Scotland? I'm not sure. Stirling? Is that a place in the UK? There we go. Has 3 Weatherspoons. Another town in the UK, in England somewhere. Brighton, I'm sure, will have multiple Weatherspoons. 3, the West Quay. Let's click on a random Weatherspoons. Sienna saying it's a buffet-style chain pub with some British stereotypical decor. I mean, all the food is like the same. Like it's very much chain food like that. I mean, it's all microwaved. Tom Alexander saying, summer of Weatherspoons, big pubs with sticky tables, cheap drinks, and full of underage drinkers. Yeah, they're like cheap and cheerful. You can get a pint for like £2.50, which is much cheaper than anywhere else. Alexander saying Wolverhampton. I bet Wolverhampton has loads of Weatherspoons. Ketcher saying our spoon's so crap, but a convenient place to hang out when you're a broke student. Had a memorable post-wedding hangover breakfast in the one in Milton Keynes once, lol. Yeah, they do a big breakfast. Don't do a roast anymore, which I think I saw less uproar about than perhaps there should have been. But yeah, so big pub. And I would say, maybe this is controversial, I get really annoyed when people go really, really anti-Weatherspoons, because I think the role that they serve in contemporary British society is really important. Because it's probably one of the cheapest places to go and sit down, like in normal times, in non-COVID times. Like, it is existing in public spaces is quite difficult, right? Maybe something that maybe I don't know, Sienna might have touched upon in her essay that she was mentioning a moment ago, is that who was it that mentioned the it's Ketcher that's talking about the new enclosure, around land privatisation. So there's a big thing in the UK, as in other countries, of sort of like public-private spaces, where, you know, increasingly in city centres, or sort of pseudo-public space, the Guardian calls here, like increasingly in sort of city centres, you get spaces which like feel as though they're sort of a public plaza or something, but in actual fact they're owned by someone, and so you can be turfed out at like no notice. In fact, I think when it was Occupy London, I think one of the big reasons that they were able to be kicked out was that it wasn't the square that they were. Oh no, because it was the steps of St. Paul's, and although, well, the initial place that the camp was going to happen seemed like a public square, but wasn't, so they were able to have an injunction to stop people going there, and then everyone was kicked off the steps of St. Paul's, which again are out in the open and very much feel like a public space, but aren't. And yeah, so it's quite expensive just to like be around. Like if you're walking around town and get a bit tired, where do you go? If maybe the library, but if that's not close, but like spoons, you could get like, I don't know, I'm sure you can get like a Coke for like £1 or something, probably. Like I don't know, they do coffee all day, I think that's like maybe £2 and you can have as many refills as you want. So I think that the role that they play in the world. Ketracrelic saying like all around King's Cross. I don't know King's Cross super well, but that sounds like it very much could be the case. Like it's just quite expensive just to like exist in public space, and so the role that they play is kind of quite important. And I'm sure they save a lot of pubs that would otherwise just cease to exist. However, and there is always a however, I feel, what they tend to do is that Tim Martin, who is the guy who sort of owns Wetherspoons, I believe, and I mean he must do, because he seems to get to impose his sort of will upon the organisation. So Tim Martin is, let me look him up. He also has he himself has a very strong, what I'd call a strong aesthetic. Here we go. Here is Tim Martin. Like, just what a guy. Like, just what. I don't like to go for someone's appearance because I feel like that's mean. But what a strong vibe that this guy has. He was, as Sienna's saying in the chat, like he was a very ardent Brexiteer. At the beginning of COVID, he wasn't gonna furlough his staff, I think. He also has some good political views in that. What is it? Every year, Wetherspoons do what's called Tax Parity Day, I think. So basically, one of the reasons that it's really cheap to buy booze... One of the reasons that it's more expensive to buy booze in pubs is that VAT is more expensive in... I think if you buy booze in the supermarket, it is less expensive. No, it's more expensive because the VAT is lower. No, it's cheaper because the VAT is lower, than if you buy booze in a pub. And so, they suggest that they should bring the sort of tax that you pay on booze in pubs down, which I don't think is a ridiculous idea, right? I think that there are huge social benefits to the existence of pubs, right? Because I don't know, people in a very individualistic society, they are places where people meet and congregate, etc., etc. But Tim Martin, is, as Sienna was saying in the chat a moment ago, was ardent Brexiteer, and even on things where I might agree with him, which are probably quite few and far between, he is very outspoken. And so Wetherspoons also has a magazine called the Wetherspoons News, which, who was it that brought this up in the first place? I can't remember. Who was it that... I'm trying to re-find it in the... Oh, sorry. As Tom said in the chat, the Wetherspoons News is a bizarre magazine in that, half of it is... Oh, can I find, a picture of the Wetherspoons News? So, half of the Wetherspoons News... it's like a sort of glossy magazine, like A4 or whatever normal sized magazines are, that is, left around in the pubs. I think probably it starts life in some sort of dispenser thing, but usually they're just scattered all over the tables. here we go. Here's the Wetherspoons news. Half of it is what you would imagine from like a magazine that exists inside a like pub or shop or cafe to be read by people in versions of that chain of pubs or shops or cafes. Although I guess it's not a super widespread thing. In that it will be like the pub of the month. This is a pub that is part of the Wetherspoons chain and is good. And it'll be like employee news. It'll be like Jeff from the Frog's Arms in Slough recently ran a marathon and raised lots of money. Or it'll be like, someone else won Employee of the Year, etc. But then it also has like these sort of polemical political essays, I think often written by, or like ostensibly written by Tim Martin, where he'll be like, also I think immigration's too high. So it's got a really bizarre vibe as a magazine, and therefore as a bar as a whole. Ketra saying you had no idea that Wetherspoons had a magazine. It's like I feel like when I go in, they're always like on the side, and I think their audience are the sort of people who are extreme, what I'd call like extreme Wetherspoons regulars, and therefore are there like in the whole morning. Ketcher putting forward a really good point of saying I have a complicated feeling about pubs because they can be good, but I always feel vaguely uncomfortable in them as a POC, being surrounded by drunk white people. And yeah, like there is a very clear thing where lots of pubs in the UK can be like spaces. I mean, they're very much associated with like men as like a masculine space where, a pub is where you drink beer and cider and ale, rather than, and like the traditional expectation is that there's maybe a wine. And it's like a single wine. There is also, and they're like, so they do have that connection to that kind of culture, I guess. And so I think that's a really important caveat to make. Tom saying that the magazine has an enormous spread at the beginning called Tim's Viewpoint. I think that's the like polemical bit. In fact, if I go to Firefox, can I find Tim's Viewpoint? Is that what it's called? Tim's Viewpoint. Oh, so we can find. Oh, here we go. So we can find some examples of some of Tim Martin's pointers, his sort of like polemics. And lots of these are. I think all of these are EU, maybe. Although this is Wetherspoons / Tim's Viewpoint, so you would assume that it would be everything. He was certain that there wasn't. I'm not sure if he wanted there to be a no deal Brexit, or whether he was suggesting that there definitely wasn't going to be one, and that's why he was going to buy everyone a pint or something. And of course, he always goes on to. He's quite often on like Question Time, which I think we discussed in a previous week for people who are here, is like the UK's sort of political debate program where they'll have like, there's a great sketch. In fact, I think the only way I can really introduce you to Question Time is through the Harry and Paul sketch, because this will, for anyone who's not ever watched an episode of Question Time, this will perfectly encapsulate sort of what it is. And for anyone who hasn't seen this sketch, it will be very, very amusing. Oh, I need to pause. I pause the music of Tonight We Riot very briefly. Options, audio. Okay, I've done that. So this is. I don't know if anyone's seen this. I adore this sketch. I think it's really funny. It's coming through. Oh, I've muted it probably. University of London. All the pop-up things are happening. So this is probably the best introduction to BBC Question Time that anyone can have, I think.
If I could come to you, sir, the gentleman in the red jumper.
Yes, well, firstly, if the bankers, the bonuses, the bankers, the bonuses, it's disgusting. And secondly, if the Tories are really serious about it, they tax the bankers, the bonuses to 90%. If all the Eton Tories that went to Harrow School had gone to comprehensives, then perhaps we'd still have the grammar schools, actually.
Thank you. That's an original comment. I'm being sarcastic, of course. Now, if you're a moronic whinger and you would like to make a fool of yourself in the Question Time audience with a witless, lame remark, next week we'll be at the former Polytechnic of Grey Buildings, now, of course, Cambridge Ring Road University. But back to tonight and what the audience think of what they've heard so far. If I could go to you, sir, in the blue tie.
Good evening, Jonathan.
It's David. My brother's Jonathan. We'll come back to you. You, sir, at the back in the green pullover, do you have a cliched thought for us? No, just let the microphone get to you.
Yes, I just don't understand this Tracy Emin art.
Thank you. You, sir, with the sweat. Shall we try again?
My question to the panel is, does the panel think, surely if we've all got to pay for them, the onesie?
Gonna have to leave it there. Gentleman down the front in the blue pullover.
Does the panel think that Boris Johnson would make a better Boris Johnson than Boris Johnson?
Thank you. The woman in the pink cardigan, the big teeth.
If the BBC spent more or less money on better programmes, then it wouldn't be such an insult to the licence fee payer.
And, of course, if you are Twitter and tweet, then you can Twitter and tweet us here at the BBC, and I, for one, of course, will not look at a word you write. If I could go to the gentleman over there in the funny beige jumper.
Wouldn't it be better if the government just admitted he got it wrong?
Thank you. And the sweaty...
Sienna's saying that, like, the clapping is perfect. And it is one of these things that, like, most of the audience members... I think what this doesn't get across is that, as you sort of briefly got a glimpse of, that there is like a panel each week of sort of like, and I think they come on in the sketch in a minute, of like a bunch of different politicians. So it'll have like, a Labour politician, a Tory politician, then like a politician from like sort of one of the other parties. So it might have a Green, it might be a Lib Dem, it might be a UKIP person, and they'll sort of like be asked questions and then they all sort of have to respond to it. But all of the it's saying it's going to be my stream's going to be temporarily blocked potentially because we've detected copyrighted audio and video. Okay, that's gone away now. That's gone away. Did it go away? Or maybe I should have talked more because I was just watching it and not talking over it. But one thing, so like basically people bring questions and the questions are often like not great questions. So what you actually end up with is a bunch of politicians sort of asking questions which aren't super, they're not like astute critiques of the political programme of the like government or whatever, or of the opposition party. Maybe we should go on some I'm trying to think. I think if we go on Twitter, we might be able to bring up some question time questions. God, it did sound a bit like a Black Mirror episode, didn't it? Question mirror. Oh no, I read a thing while I was trying to type the thing, and that meant that I just typed in the thing that I read. Oh, BBC question time. That's what I want. Because they always tweet out the questions. It would have been yesterday, would it? Or is it tonight? I can't remember. No, it was yesterday. Trying to find some really... I swear... All right. Why is the eviction ban on tenants with arrears finished when full restrictions have not been lifted and people... Oh, that's actually a good one. There is occasionally sort of decent ones. I swear they normally have more questions compared to like clips and stuff. They have a bit of a track record with having slightly... Like, yeah, there's always going to be new variants, someone being like, we can't be locked up forever, which is part and parcel, really, of the BBC's odd thing about the way it tends to interpret impartiality, where it tends to assume that means that it has to treat all views with all views as though they're just as legitimate as other views. So, like, if you have someone on talking about climate change, you also have to have someone on talking about how climate change isn't real, which sort of isn't really the definition of impartiality, because that's, this sort of weird, thing where you're treating completely nonsense viewpoints with completely with like facts, I guess. Let's watch the end, because I think it comes to a little bit where they... my favourite joke's at the end, actually.
In the funny beige jumper.
Wouldn't it be better if the government just admitted they got it wrong?
Thank you. And the sweaty man. One more go? No? And now our final question, the lame, jokey question, which comes this week from Brian Farnett of Frian Barnett.
Oh, yeah. And quite often, like, the final question of the week will be something slightly stupid, like a comedy question.
Yes, David. If the panel was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, would they make a Jordan or George Osborne eating slugs?
David Torrey.
I've never actually but
Baroness Token.
Well, I also have never but
Ed Siliband.
Well, I also have never but I do think there's an important point to make here, which is the Tories.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're running out of time.
David, if you'd allow me to finish my sentence. The Tories.
And finally, funny person and comedian who wants to be taken seriously, Jimmy Gagg.
Anal sex.
Well, we've run out of time, thank God. Next week, our panel includes the...
Like, basically, they always have someone who's like a comedian on as well to, like, I don't know, make it less sort of staid, but it's often just slightly... It just gives it slightly weird vibes.
Of the Exchequer, the chairman of BP, and Dappy from NDubs. But from all of us here at the University of Tired Sheffield, good night.
And I guess the other point is that each week it sort of goes to a different place. I think recently with COVID they've been doing it, and people have like sort of Skyped in or whatever, or Zoomed in or something, and asked their questions like that. But yeah, part of it is that each week it goes to a different place, and usually that means that it's in a sort of auditorium at a university or at a school, and they bring in these sort of seats and stuff. The Lit Crit guy saying, "Good evening, everyone. Good evening." Novicius Santana saying, "Explaining jokes." I mean, we have an audience who might not all be in the UK, so it seemed worth sort of giving a sense of it. But so that was my introduction to what question time is. But Tim Martin is quite often like the additional person. There's quite often like a comedy person who's like maybe an actor or a celebrity. It's very much where Lawrence Fox got his new career from, was by being the sort of person who's in the public eye but not like a political person, I guess. And then that's probably a problem with the video being too loud rather than the microphone being too loud, I'd imagine. But then they also, that would also sometimes be like who Tim Martin is, although I would say that as much of his job is probably political commentator as publican. And then they quite often have like a sort of silly comedian on as well. But yeah, that sums up Weatherspoons and the amazing weirdness of the Weatherspoons magazine, which is a fantastic publication, which maybe there is a video in that at some point, in just taking apart the Weatherspoons magazine. Sienna's saying that they often get in someone who's like in the public eye who once said something mildly political. So they will quite often, and I think it's meant it's odd because they're meant to be. I think the sort of comedy person is often meant to be the like voice of the public almost. That they're like the non-politician that's there, but like inevitably it is someone like in the sketch, like in the sketch we're just watching, like this is clearly meant to be Jimmy Carr, right? And so quite often the thing is like Jimmy Carr is not like a normal person, right? He's like must be a millionaire, surely. I don't know how much comedy pays, but at that stage it must be that much. Although Ed Miliband does sort of date this video a little bit. Ketrakrelek saying, isn't a Question Time-esque show the inciting incident for years and years? Yes. I think Emma Thompson's character, who is kind of like a female Nigel Farage. I think it is a sort of... Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. You can very quickly see the... Oh, you can't because I've not put it up.
At the state we are in.
Yeah. So it is on the trailer. Ketra saying that I've only seen the first episode, but I have a friend who's obsessed with it. I really, really enjoyed Years and Years. So I wasn't sure initially. So Years and Years came out a couple of years ago. For those of you that didn't see it, it was a show who did the first few seasons of Doctor Who, of the like new Doctor Who, as well as more recently the AIDS crisis thing, which was called I really enjoyed it, and I can't remember what it was called. Oh, we did Queer as Folk, and then and Cucumber as well. It's a Sin, that was the thing. And basically, yeah, so I wasn't sure, because it sort of was very much a sort of post-Trump, post-Brexit TV show, in that it's all about, like, it sort of predicts a future in which thing... I mean, let's watch the trailer briefly, and you can sort of get a sense of what it's about.
Look at the state we are in. God knows we need to shake things up. So, I propose that in order to vote, every British citizen must take an IQ test.
What did she just say?
Are you saying that some people are too stupid to vote?
I've got you listening now, haven't I?
Things were okay a few years ago.
Surprise!
Now, I don't know what to worry about first.
I'm only just beginning.
What's it going to be like for you?
We used to think the news was boring. It turns out we were born in a pause.
I'm going to pause it every so often since YouTube told me off. But yeah, so it sort of slowly goes forward through each year. So like, I think it's 1 year maybe that it does each time as the UK sort of descends into a sort of far-right dystopia. And as Alexander's saying in the chat, that it sort of ends with sort of camps. It ends up with, basically she starts off saying that people should have to take a test to vote, and eventually gets to the point where she's like, you know, the British invented concentration camps. I don't see why we shouldn't do that again. Navish saying, is that Farage or Le Pen? So yeah, it's sort of like a mixture, without knowing the specifics of the case of Le Pen in France, or at least without knowing so much about that. I'd say it's more sort of based on a Farage that gets to express all the things that he most probably would like to say but doesn't. Ketra saying, yeah, I tapped out because I thought it would be too depressing. Well, I think I just thought it would be really silly. I think I just thought like it was going to be another sort of Trump era thing where it was like a bit, I don't know, like a bit, everything was fine before this and this is a sudden turn into things being bad and therefore everything's going to like be the worst that it possibly could be. Whereas actually I thought it was much more, I don't know, it was much more grounded than that. There's real scenes in this series that just like are like gut punching. Like are really I think it's the way that it really focuses on the people. Like the politics is sort of the background to it and is sort of what is in many ways sort of guiding the sort of world that they exist in, but that it's the experiences and sort of dashed hopes and dreams or of the individuals that it sort of focuses mainly on a single family. It's that yeah, it just really like there's some real gut punches. There's some real gut punches throughout it. So I'd say it's really worth a watch. I'd quite like to watch it again at some point. Nigel Farage is doing cameo videos for. I think I knew that. Actually. He's doing. There's a lot of. He's doing a lot of like financial freedom adverts that I keep getting. Doing like take back control of your so take back control was famously the like Brexit slogan, and there's probably some slightly OTT stuff of like people, you know, suggesting that the choice of that particular slogan won the whole Brexit thing, which is, you know, probably a bit of a overstatement, but it's really interesting the way he still uses that lingo, like in these like financial freedom things. I mean, it sounds like it's just like a sort of grift where you invest your money and he tells you where to invest your money. But I keep getting his adverts for this all the time, like on every single video that I watch. And it just sort of uses his his sort of fame, his sort of political fame to do that. But I didn't know that he was doing cameos as well. Cameos are sort of a weird thing that exists. Do you reckon we can watch any of his cameos? Because sometimes you can watch them from other people, can't you? Oh God, it is like, it's interesting because it often feels like stuff like this is like sort of grift adjacent, right? It's not 100% grift because, like, I don't know, someone is paying money to get a thing that they get, but it does sort of feel, I don't know. I wonder how much it costs. Let's listen to what Nigel Farage, British politician, has to say too. What was this? I don't know. Maybe it's a birthday? Let's see.
Well, hello, Rob Barrett. Now, your daughter Gail has spoken to me because it is your birthday and she wants to wish you many happy returns of the day. And I'm going to join her in that. I'm going to thank you for being a fan of mine, a supporter of my Brexit campaign. Rob, without people like you, we could never have done it. And you know what? We have done it. As I've said many times before, they're not laughing now, are they? We've got 70% approval for Brexit. Gordon Brown this morning said he's going to fight for the rest of his career to reverse Brexit. He's like one of those sort of Japanese stuck in a bunker in 1950, not realising the war is over. It is over. It's done. So raise a glass, Rob, to being in an independent, proud, United Kingdom. Happy birthday.
I just love the fact that, like, none of that's about Rob's birthday. I mean, like, maybe that's what... Maybe that... Whoa, he did a rap. Okay, we have to find this. I just love the fact that, like... I don't know, maybe that's what Rob wants for his birthday. Nigel Farage cameo rap. Oh, so it costs £63 and 75p. Oh, who did he get pranked into wishing happy birthday to? I'm always a big fan of these. Yeah, poor Rob. Poor Rob. It is kind of depressing. I like the bit when he's like in that video where he was like, and look at us now. And it's like, you're selling happy birthday messages for 63 quid. Like, I do get that he's like, his political ambitions in terms of like the stuff, the way he wants the world to look have been... He was paid to wish happy birthday to a huge anus. That is a classic. Happy birthday, huge anus. Pretty much fine. Oh, has anyone seen the kicked in the head by a horse thing? Now I'm not a particular fan of. I don't know. I think most of the ways in which the Remain position was talked about were always really annoying and patronising. But this was just funny as a. This was so funny. Oh, this is gonna come up with some really grim videos, isn't it? No, okay. Like, this is just such a good, like, just such a good little prank.
Bit sorry for Boris, Mark, or not?
That's where I've been for the last few years. I've got to say, I'm immensely grateful to you for everything you've done in British politics over the last few years. I used to be an ardent Remainer. I voted Remain. I believed in the European project.
Mm-hmm.
I believed that staying in the European Union was the best thing for us. And then something happened, and something monumental happened. It completely changed my opinion on the whole situation.
What was that monumental thing, Mark?
I was kicked in the head by a horse.
Right, very good. Okay, fine. Thank you. Mark, we're going to move on from that and go to David.
Like, I think for me, it's the way he manages to get him to ask what the thing was. Like, that like, he like, if he'd have just said it, it wouldn't have been... I don't know, it wouldn't have been... But it's the way that, like, he gets Nigel Farage to set... to sort of set him up for it. Navish is saying you're going to talk about his accent being appealing. I mean, yeah, like he's got that southeast accent, which people like, I don't know, find trusting, I guess, because we've been sort of conditioned to think that we should trust people with public school accents. I'm glad people enjoyed that. Like the build, as Sienna's saying, like the build up to it, where he kind of like just sort of forces him to set him up. It is like I don't think you could write stuff that funny. Navish saying, someone who speaks a non-Indo-European language as the first language, his accent sounds funny but also professional. I mean, it's that thing of like, you know, these are the kind of people that we send up generally in our culture, right? How many of the sort of figures that were having the piss taken out of them in the Question Time sketch had a similar accent to Nigel Farage, right? Because they're those figures of authority. One of the weird things about British culture, I think, is that people will like know that they'll know that like figures like Farage or Johnson or like anyone sort of that ilk, they'll know that they're lying to them and that they do not have their best interests at heart, etc. Yet they will vote them in anyway. Kedra saying things accents trying to convey working class made good. I don't know where to place it, to be honest.
What was that monumental thing, Mark?
I was kicked in the head by a horse.
Right, very good. Okay.
Yeah, maybe it does have a dash of blokiness to it, I guess. I mean, he very much like his whole thing was I don't know, was being that like man of the people that goes to the pub. Even though, Sienna saying self-made British straight talker, saying how it is. Even though like he used to work in the city, right, and used to be a like investment banker, I think. So he is, he's not the sort of man of the people that he suggests that he would like to be. I think what I found interesting, he's sort of a failed Trump in many ways, I'd say. Like that they have a similar kind of thing where they're both quite wealthy but have tried to portray themselves as men of the people. Even though, I don't know, Farage always sort of addressed himself in the aesthetic of your sort of working class bloke who's down the pub, whereas Trump sort of managed to spin his wealth as, you know, it's self-made success or whatever. Navish is saying, has any Brit here ever wondered why we colonial folks prefer the Queen's English accent because we can actually understand them better? And I'd say there's a deep political history to why that accent, why a particular accent is understood better, because it's taught as the standard. I mean, the history of a kind of like Queen's English is that it was the sort of pronunciation taught at private schools in England, and therefore sort of became the de facto standard. And so you're sort of taught to understand it, and we're sort of culturally taught that that's the right way, like in a way that like that to say a word in a sort of southwest or north or Midlands accent, you're sort of taught that is the one that you then have to like translate it back to your received pronunciation. version of that word for that to be like the proper one almost. In fact, one thing that's going to come up a few times in my next video is the sort of standardization of language only very briefly, but is going to come up in the next video is the sort of standardization of language that sort of initially came with print, I guess, in terms of how words were written, and then, I mean, quite possibly didn't come until radio, I would guess. I didn't go into it that quite to that depth, but I would imagine maybe didn't come around until sort of radio, where you get the standardization of the spoken language as well. There's a brilliant quote from Eric Hobsbawm, historian, who talks about how even as recently, and I know this doesn't sound super recent, but I suppose relatively recently, as like the French Revolution, something like more than half of people in France didn't speak French. They spoke Breton or some other regional dialect, and then even of the people that spoke it, like I think he says like 13 or 14% of people would have, spoken like good French, as in like the same kind of French which came to be, what today we would call French. Whereas, which I would imagine would have been similar in other countries. Tom Alexander saying the British Library has a fantastic collection of early 20th century recordings. The accents are very different, particularly in the South. Wonder if I can find those. Wonder if they've got any kind of footprint of those online. British Library accents map. It's very UK specific, I feel this. But let's have a look. Where's stuff going to come up? I didn't get how this works. I feel like maybe this is like an old web page and it doesn't work so much anymore. Anything New York? Nope. Can I accent it in a different way? Nope. This is not working. Italian is even more split in that way, Alexander's saying. I mean, that's probably extra interesting given that, like, Italy's pretty young as a country, right? When was Italian unification? That was, like, pretty recently, right? That was 1861. So yeah, Italy just didn't really exist. Hasn't really existed for that long. I can't get these maps. I can't get these accent maps to work, which is annoying. UK sound map. That's gonna be like sounds of stuff. Well, that's interesting. Clockwork King saying, it's weird how in America we have accents, but aside from some southern accents, Cajun accents, and anything designated foreign, we really don't associate accents with class much at all. I'd wonder whether that is in part related to just the like complete massive size of the country. Like, probably more recently, there's a similar thing with, like, if you want to do something that is a job that is particularly well off, that you might have to go to New York or LA or a sort of bigger city. But I wonder whether just America's so big that there sort of has to be a relatively well off class in sort of most states, at least. So, is there within... It'd be interesting to know a bit about, like, whether within states there is some sense of, like, class difference. Sienna saying possibly to do with America not having a socialist movement, the intention to class, etc. Potentially, I mean, there's I think last week we were talking about that quote from who was it? Was it Steinbeck who said the thing about poor people in America not thinking of themselves as like a proletariat, but as a temporarily dispossessed millionaires. I think the ways in which class gets talked about is slightly different. LA accent is the most annoying ever. LA was sort of weird place. I've been there once for like 2 days, but it was a slightly odd place, very sprawled out. Ketcher saying someone should do a study using like YouTube clips or something. The ethics form might be a pain to sort out though. I wonder whether you can place. I suppose you have to hope that if people have done some sort of geolocation on their videos, potentially you can use that to sort of, locate where the video is from to add to the accent. Long Island. Is Long Island like, is that like Janice from Friends? Long Island accent. Am I right in thinking that? That like sort of, I can't even work out how to describe that accent. Clockwork King saying most young people in recent years seem to be almost accentless. I mean, there's a whole discussion to be had, like, which is similar to the one we were having a moment ago, about like what counts as accentless, right? What counts as just talking, and what counts as as speaking with an accent. And some like obvious acknowledgement in the chat that like the ways that that those interact with race and class are really important too. And like whole different dialect. Exactly. Ketcher bringing up African American vernacular English, like you still do get like completely different dialects which have particular histories, or multicultural London English, and the ways in which both those examples are interesting in terms of how they interact with sort of like languages of power, and there's all sorts of Falco shooting lasers saying being from NorCal, I'm guessing that's Northern California. It's like SoCal is Southern California, I think, right? Me and most of my friends would have never had thought we had accents. I can't even think of what the accent is. And Alexander saying most of the British middle class has one accent. And not a huge amount of social mobility in the UK. I mean, the book to read if you're interested in contemporary class in the UK is called Social Class in the 21st Century, by Mike Savage and a team of other researchers, and it is a there is aspects of it that I would probably query, but I think in terms of like how class manifests, it's a really, really interesting book, and pretty readable, I'd say. And he uses lots of survey data to kind of see, a lot of it is about how social mobility works in the present day, and a lot of that's really interesting. Like particularly some of the stuff about universities, as that picture is showing there. like the way which we talk about university. And I get the sort of sense it's maybe the same in the US about how college is talked about. The way we talk about university in the UK is that we quite often use someone going to university as a proxy for class. So if they've been to a university, they are middle class, whereas if they haven't been to university, they are working class. But one of the things that they bring up in this book is that they sort of say that actually the important thing in like the present day UK is less did you go to university or not, and more where did you go to university. So like in the UK there is a thing called the Russell Group, which is pretty similar to like the Ivy League in the US. I think that has its origins in like sports in some way, but and whereas this is a relatively recent invention, I think, the Russell Group. Like, I don't think it's a decade old, is it? Oh, okay, no, 1994, sorry. So a little bit older than I thought. It was incorporated until 2007. Oh, I guess maybe it was like more informal before then. But, which is like, yeah, the like 24 most esteemed universities, I guess. Ketcher saying that in the chat actually. The 1995 group. Is 1994 sort of post 90? I think it might be. Is it 94? I can't remember. But rather than lots of other universities which previously used to be known as polytechnics, and then sort of, or which were sort of slightly more technical schools, which then became universities. Which is, yeah, partly a kind of snobbery, but the ways that, like, because in terms of like social mobility, university works on all different kinds of levels. So on one level, there's like the education bit of, the quality of the teaching and the syllabus and the learning, etc. But on the other level, there's also like the people that you're going to meet. Well, there's the CV thing of how good does it look on a CV. If you went to Oxford and got a second, it probably works better for you than if you went to, I don't know, anywhere else and got a first. But there's also the thing of like who else is there, right? So, if there's a bit in the book, also in Social Class in the 21st Century, where they're talking about, they say something like, there's like a certain percentage of people that meet the partner that they're going to be with for at least a lot of their lives at university, and given that one way in which rich people hold on to their money as a sort of class is through marriage, like that you almost get this thing of people selecting, like, of people only marrying rich because they go to the same university, right? And also, you might meet other people who are likely, you've got rich parents who can invest a bit of money in your business idea, and you meet someone else who also has rich parents who can invest some money in your business idea. So you sort of get all of that too. Barbara saying, I'm a teacher in southern Germany / Bavaria. Most of my students are bilingual, and switch between accent talking to each other and standard talking to the teacher. That is really interesting. Ketra saying, oh yeah, there is a meme about 70% of Durham students meeting their spouses there. And yeah, no, that's like borne out in the data, is that yeah, people do quite often, if they go to university, meet their, at least a spouse that they're going to be with for a considerable amount of time at university. And so like there are multiple I always remember So actually, this brings up Germany as well. This brings together lots of threads of conversation. Just before COVID and everything, I went to Germany to do a talk at university there, and I sort of ended up doing like a sort of, I guess it was a sort of intro to theory talk, but sort of very broad and just trying to sort of engage a bunch of young people that were in their first or second years of university course in some theory stuff. So first thing I did was I talked about 3 different ways that we could analyze an artifact that I'd seen at the museum, I think. I can't remember what it was. There was like was it like an Egyptian bust of some description? The Nefertiti bust. So on the day before I went to see the Nefertiti bust, which exists in which museum's it in? It's in the Noise Museum in Berlin. And so I was like, cool, let's use this as like the basis for our discussion. And so I did like 3 different ways to talk about this. So we did like let's look at it from a cultural materialist angle, right? Why was this made? What purpose did it serve, right? It was of a ruler, and the idea of having the bust is because it projects power. Let's take a feminist lens and let's consider what does it mean for such an old piece of work to be of a woman, and is it, what do we think? Is it projecting power? Is it projecting beauty? Whatever. And then, let's take a post-colonial lens and ask, why is this in Berlin, rather than, in Egypt or anywhere else in the world. But then we're doing Q&A afterwards, and someone was like asking me to talk about Pierre Bourdieu's sort of 3 forms of capital, economic capital and social capital and cultural capital. And one of the things that, and we're sort of saying, where does education fit into this? And I was like, well, in many ways, all 3, because, where you go to university might give you access to certain forms of economic capital, because, certain job applications, you have to have a degree, or, going to a certain university might unlock certain job opportunities where, which might mean you get paid more, but then also, it might unlock some social capital because you might meet people there, but also it might unlock some cultural capital because you might learn what, I don't know, some pretentious loser from the UK might come in and give you a talk where he decides to centre on Nefertiti's bust, right? So that's one of the complicated things about talking about education in these sort of class terms, is that in many ways it is all of these things, and it sort of sits between them. Novitius, I can't remember where in the world you said you were, Novitius, if you did, but you're saying that the English words that we use is alliance, as common alternative for marriage. That's exactly how it's used as well. And yeah, it sort of is. I'm avoiding my text. He called me Harry Maguire. I have no idea who Harry Maguire is, I'm afraid. I'm assuming a not very attractive person. Okay. Oh yeah, of course. He looks far more athletic than me. The universities really rake money in. They've created a model where it's necessary to go in. Yeah. So I've been for a long time, sort of an idea that I've floated is to talk about the sort of, instrumentalization of the university, and sort of, I suppose, the sort of neoliberalization of the university more broadly, but particularly its instrumentalization, I think. The way in which university has stopped being a place where, in popular consciousness, and I think it very much in the consciousness of students, has gone from being a place where you go to have a like holistic liberal education, liberal in the sense of like broad, to a place where you go to get a particular bit of paper, which it then potentially unlocks doors for you afterwards. And I think the ways in which we don't talk about, we don't talk about the ways in which what university you go to is important, where actually we should. When I grew up, it was a given that you sort of, when I grew up, it was sort of the late, or when I was getting to university age, it was very much the late New Labour years, where everyone was encouraged to go to university, but you were sort of told that it doesn't really matter where you go, whereas actually, on reflection, that's really, really central to it all. Navicious saying, how do they make money off their investments, by the way? I think universities in the UK tend to have don't have quite as large endowments as some of those in the US. Probably Oxford and Cambridge quite possibly do, but other than that, not quite so much. But yeah, lots of universities make a lot of their money from investing their endowments in various things. There is a thing that's worth watching is there is a sort of documentary on I think it's called the Great College Admissions Scandal or something. Operation Varsity Blues, the college admissions scandal, on which is like a Netflix original, where they look at, I think was it like a year ago or a couple of years? Well, no, it must be more than that for them to have made a whole documentary about it. Might have been a couple of years ago now. But it's all about this big scandal in the US where lots of people, like even some like relatively famous people, were like caught up in this thing where this guy would. One way that universities can get around people having to have good grades in the US is if people get like a sports scholarship. So he would offer coaches in sports where people often don't pay huge amounts of attention to them. So like rowing or I can't think what some other ones were, but like really niche sports. And the parents would then like donate some money to the sports program so that their kid who like had never played this sport before and had no intention of doing so at university could like get in through that. Ketcher saying that's interesting in private schools. They're still very open about needing to go to Russell Group only. Like I think there was definitely the sense of like Oxford and Cambridge are good, but definitely when I was at college, it was, I don't know, I was doing like a music course as well, so it wasn't as though people were necessarily trying to go to that kind of university, but yeah, that wasn't like an emphasis. That wasn't something that was really foregrounded at all. It was like the idea that you went was the important thing. And some discussion in the chat about who goes to private school. Yeah, so I think there's a thing. In fact, so last week, I think there was an interesting article about how like sort of top students in the UK were going to like fly the country because Oxford and Cambridge were no longer taking on as many kids from private schools. I'll try and find the article for us to take a look at. Trying to think of what the right words to type in to get it to come up are. can't remember what paper it was in either. Top students, Oxford, private schools. Oh, have we lost connection? Have we lost connection or not? Can't work out. I might need to disconnect and reconnect. I seem to... Am I moving smoothly again? Let me know in the chat if... I can't find this story now. Might have been in the Times. It was all about how... It was very much... I'm very quickly going to Oh, Paul's saying that he can see me. At least someone can. Ketcher's saying he can still... I'm going to disconnect and reconnect. Hopefully I'm back and smooth now. I think I disconnected and then reconnected just after it had done. Here we go. So I found the article. I think this is a version... Oh no, it must have been a week ago then that this sort of came up on the internet about Britain's brightest plot a course across the pond. The number of private school teenagers going to America is soaring as elite universities here take more state students. So there's been a lot of pressure on Oxford and Cambridge universities in recent years to accept more students from state schools where you go and you don't pay to go. It's sort of part. Well, you do, I guess, as part of your taxes, but you don't pay extra to go. Rather than having lots and lots of students from private schools and public schools, which are both like sort of fee-paying schools, I guess, to wrap it all up into one. Now, if I try and find the figures, let's see what the percentage are of Oxford students. So, the Guardian said, let's see, earlier this year, the Guardian said that typically between 30% and 40% of Oxbridge undergrads come from the private sector, so from fee-paying schools, whereas only 7% of the school-age population attends fee-paying schools. So, like, the statistics in terms of who goes to Oxford and Cambridge are like fee-paying kids, I guess, or the children of fee-paying parents are massively overrepresented at Oxford and Cambridge. And there's some anxiety here because, and the way that this story is framed of Britain's brightest is suggesting that just because these kids go to fee-paying schools, they're like the brightest, whereas actually it's Britain's richest plot a course across the pond. And some people, kicked back rightly that, actually it's a good thing that Oxbridge are letting in more kids who are not from fee-paying schools background, because of course that's a good thing. The amount of life opportunities that going to one of those universities opens up to people is ridiculous, and so closing them off to just people from fee-paying schools is has a terrible effect on our society. I think how many number of prime ministers, British prime ministers that went to either Oxford or Cambridge. Of 55 prime ministers to date, 28 were educated at Oxford, and 14 at Cambridge. So that's, 30, 42. So that's, a strong, maybe almost 90% or just under 90%. So, the benefits of going to Oxford and Cambridge are apparent. Although, my critique would be slightly different in that maybe we should abolish Oxford and Cambridge. Like, I think the ways in which they intensify, what it means to be intelligent, or sort of not intensify, but concentrate it into one particular place, or to be a competent, young person that is set up to be do good things in life, is unhealthy in and of itself. That actually, rather than the solution being to send more working class kids from state schools to Oxford and Cambridge, should quite possibly be to rethink the system a little bit and work out how we can democratize some of the opportunities that have previously been concentrated amongst kids that have been to these schools. Reading about Oxford and Cambridge often seems just absolutely bizarre. One of the stories in recent days in the UK has been about a group of students at Oxford who took down a picture of the Queen. And sort of reading this story is just it's like reading a story from a different world. Because it's like members of Magdalen College Middle Common Room deemed the image of symbol of recent colonial history. And there's a whole debate to be had about this whole thing, right? And whether these students had the right to decide what photos are up in their room, which seems fair enough. But what, in my mind, a common room, I guess, is a place where people go to hang out. I don't know what it means to be a member of a common room. So it is like the way that sort of Oxford and Cambridge work, the sort of way that pedagogy is done and education is done there is also quite different. I think I'm right in saying that students write an essay each week rather than a usual, like, maybe lecture and seminar model. So the way the education works is also massively different there, and probably works well for some students and not so for others, and not necessarily in a way that correlates with being more intelligent or less intelligent, just in a way that correlates with being different kinds of people who learn in different ways. So, I think it's absolutely right that people kick back against this framing of, rich kids as clever kids, because that is wrong. And the short-term thing of wanting to go, no, Oxford and Cambridge should take on more working-class kids. But at the same time, I think the concentration of sort of various forms of sort of benefits of going to those institutions is the bigger underlying problem, and actually we need to rethink the ways that our education system works to try and sort of democratize some of the benefits that currently come only from going to those particular institutions. Ketra saying that the media totally fuel the obsession with Oxford and Cambridge. Yeah, like, how often do you ever hear a news story about anywhere else, I guess? And Paul saying that, I meant to put the chat back up. Paul saying that the young people that at Oxford that are currently under fire for taking a photo down had previously previous members of the common room had voted to put this picture up. I really don't know what Sienna's saying as well. Yeah, I really don't like anything you hear about Oxbridge is always a bit bizarre. It's like reading a bad fantasy novel, I think. And Sienna saying about that story is like total just stoking up flames of the culture war, which is really disingenuous. I mean, it does feel like we are sort of entrenched in a sort of very culture warsy discourse in the UK at the moment, and the US is very similar. I'm working on a written piece for a magazine at the moment, about like an online magazine, about like wokeness and anti-wokeness, and it's really interesting how difficult it is to just talk about that, because instantly you want to talk about how it plays into other aspects of like culture wars stuff and cancel culture and sort of social justice for it, like, and all of that is just so. It's just this web, and like critical race theory, obviously being the new thing in the US at the moment. That there's just this new language of the right, which is often just not based on much at all. Or meritocracy coming up in the chat. So a couple of people in the chat are mentioning the notion of like meritocracy, and there's a sort of interesting story behind this, because the word meritocracy comes from a satirical novel, interestingly, by the dad of a guy called Toby Young. So in the UK, there is a chap called Toby Young, who I'll get a quick photo up of, who is very much these days a sort of contrarian media figure in the UK, although has some connection to education stuff. He used to be the head of a group called the Office of Students, which was, the idea was that it was like an institution that students could complain to if they felt that their university had done something wrong. But his dad wrote a book called The Rise of the Meritocracy, his dad being Michael Young. And yeah, it's sort of like a dystopian sort of satire, I guess, where, you know, the ways in which society was broken up was between people who were like intellectually talented and weren't, but sort of looking at it of going, is it actually that people who are higher up in the social chain are actually like more clever, or is it that people who are better off and in positions of power define what it means to have merit in a way that sort of means that of course they are the best off. I suppose it goes back to that. There's a bit that Nietzsche writes in which book is it? I think it's Beyond Good and Evil, that he writes about you know, everywhere the word noble also means good, right? That because the nobility have, you know, made it so, or, you know, carefully worked it so that the word noble, which is also used to describe their position in society, also means being very honourable. And the word poor means to not be, for something to not be very good, because then that also suggests that you know, people who are poor are also not good at whatever they're doing. Maybe that's a video idea as well. The thing I like about these streams, I think they're quite good for. Well, there's many things that I like about these streams, but one of the things that they're particularly good for is planting the seeds of some ideas for some videos. Definitely when I've been clipping stuff out, and apologies that there hasn't been I haven't clipped much out this week because I've been focusing on getting the next video together. But one of the cool things is that when I'm clipping stuff out, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I would like to have I would like to focus on this topic more, maybe, and do it more. Sienna's saying that lecturers don't have a shred of input in what is taught. Is that at Oxford/Cambridge? I'd say lecturers have a decent amount of. I don't know. I think there's. It sort of depends. I think most universities, most courses within universities, there is sort of a scheme for how things work. But most lecturers, I think, in lots of different systems get to teach, some sort of elective courses where, they use their expertise as researchers to craft modules. I don't know a huge amount about Navicius mentioning sort of caste systems in the chat, which, I mean, the sense I get that it's even more, like 100% more rigid than sort of our notions of class. That, the way that, in fact, yeah, some of the reading I was doing around nationalism for my current video was about the ways in which sort of the idea of like a nation or a shared national identity sort of suggests that everyone from the richest of the rich down to the poorest of the poor are sort of part of the same culture, and how that was clearly like an idea that fitted within capitalism, whereby under feudalism that wouldn't have quite worked in the same way. That actually under feudalism it was okay if you had a sort of rich people culture, a noble culture, and a common culture, or a sort of local cultures of your peasantry. Like, it was okay to have that demarcation between two different cultures. But when capitalism came around, it sort of had kind of, societies had to morph towards a model where you had this idea of nations, because that sort of, because you have to have, because one of the sort of legitimizing notions of capitalism is that you can be born the poorest of the poor and work your way up to being the richest of the rich, and so you sort of have to have a shared culture in which that can work. Navish is saying that Indian national identity is the weirdest thing ever. Unity and diversity is the motto. And I'm obviously talking about this from a distance, and I'm aware that British bloke tries to talk about India with not a huge amount of knowledge about it is not a great look, given the history. But the sense that I also get is that within India, and like this probably is reflective of other places as well, like how different groups and different individuals view the national identity is probably really different. That there is probably sort of multicultural visions of Indian culture, whereas you've also got like Hindu nationalists for whom Indian sort of to be Indian is also to be a Hindu. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I mean that's the same in other places as well, right? To a lot of right wing political nationalists in like the UK, to be English or to be British is to be white. Whereas to other people there is a more sort of voluntaristic civic view of nationalism. I've been editing myself talking about this all day. I don't know if you're saying that I'm absolutely right, Novicius, or whether you're saying that Ketra is right. And Sienna's saying, yeah, as well, a flag means different things to different people. It is currently, everyone that's outside either the UK or Europe will probably not be aware of this. I don't know, maybe, but it's the Euro, well, it's the Euro 2020, which would have been the European, I don't know, what is the full title of the, where's the full title of the Euros? UEFA European Football Championship is starting at the moment, and it's the first international football tournament for which I've owned a car, and I was in the garage the other day getting diesel, and I was like, I've never been able to have the car flags that go on your car and like go in your windows and like flutter as you drive along, but maybe, but then I was like, but the, St. George's Cross has different, as I can't remember who it was that was saying, I think it was Sienna that was saying, like, yeah, different flags mean different things to different people. And, in normal times, I think it would be funny watching other people in other countries' reactions to like British left Twitter over the next few weeks will be interesting, because everyone will go from like sort of people who are very skeptical about any idea of like patriotism and are very anti even ideas of like progressive patriotism, because it always ends up being like a bit wink wink nudge nudge racism, but everyone will suddenly morph into die hard St. George Cross on the face patriots for the football, but I'm looking forward to Navish is saying I was right, and congratulations on the car. I've had it a year now, actually. We need to get new MOT on it, but it was Emily Thornberry who had the thing on the car. Ketra saying, so yeah, this was 2014. So basically she was, this was Twitter. This feels like a before Twitter thing, even though apparently it did involve Twitter. She sort of tweeted image from #Rochester, and there's like a white van outside a house with like 3 St. George's crosses on it, with this sort of the notion there being that all roll eyes at sort of white van man with flags dripped all over it, and then there was a decent amount of backlash. Barbara saying flags only acceptable during football tournaments in Germany. In fact, I've been to Germany 3 times actually. I think that's probably the most times that it's definitely the most times I've been to a country that is not the UK. And one time I was in Berlin. This was like a sort of holiday trip, and it was, I think that was the last Euros, and it was the semi-final, I think. And I went and watched it at the Brandenburg Gate. I can't remember what. That's not going to come up with anything useful, is it? But yeah, it was such good fun. It was really, really good fun. And we got stuff to like paint our faces with German flags and stuff. Never saying I don't hate flags. I mean, we all have attachments to silly and animate objects that mean a lot to us, but I'll never wear Indian flag with pride ever. I'd wear pride flag though. Yeah, it is, like, I think it is interest. Because those things come with histories, I think, don't they? Like, yeah, the Union Jack comes with a long history of violence being done in its name and under it. Oh, cool! Sienna did like a pride flag and a trans rights flag. I don't know. I'm not good enough with the. Oh yeah, you can do emojis in the chat. Catch saying I'd not feel weird at all about having Jamaican flag stuff if I was watching athletics, for example. I mean, I think it's the thing of like the history of stuff, isn't it? And the power dynamics right there. You know, I often think like nationalism's interesting in that sense, in that people generally don't bat an eyelid at like, even like to think of like current ones, like a Scottish nationalism or like Jamaican nationalism, or externally, I would say most people who don't really know much or anything about India would probably say Indian nationalism, although I know Navish is going to say that's more complicated when you're actually there, but I'm saying like from a lot of English, like, wouldn't necessarily see that as such a bad thing, because those sort of nationalisms are ones that are seeking to sort of do away with oppression, whereas the long history of the Union Jack and of that flag and that form of nationality and of that nation is that those things existed to sort of do the oppression. Catch saying Jamaican homophobia is bad though, but I think that's sort of different though, isn't it, in a sense, because that's like there is imperfections within that society rather than necessarily that like that nation and that national identity. Oh, as Paul is just saying in the chat, Jamaica has never committed atrocities or subjugated other countries like as Jamaica, I think. So like I'd say that's probably the difference there. Even like, and there's some ways in which it becomes really complicated, like maybe this is because I don't think about it so much, but I would say that like I wouldn't think such bad things of like a French nationalism, because the origins of that of the sort of mottos and everything and the flag itself and all the stuff that goes with that is, you know, your equality, fraternity, liberty, even though you know, Madagascar's still paying France back for the cost of being colonized, and you know, France has committed all sorts of atrocities and subjugations. Pride is a sort of anti-flag symbol. I think it's the question of like where is the flag coming from? What's it flying for? Isn't it? And I think once certain associations get, it's like with any symbol. I mean, I suppose a very basic thing of like semiotics, right? The sort of study of signs is that things have cultural meanings, right? There are, you know, what Roland Barthes would call cultural codes that get attached to things, whereby, you know, for example, a Union Jack gets tied to empire and colonialism, and it's hard to undo those things, I would say. Like the reasons those things become so powerful is because they exist for so long. Guess the idea, French racism is over-inclusive racism. Yeah, they have like there's like a real strict secularism, isn't there, about wearing like religious stuff. Wait, isn't genocide a bad word for monetization in YouTube, right? Don't these streams are not gonna make me any money, don't worry. So that's not a problem we have to contend with. Oh yeah, Andy. Hello, Andy. Thank you for joining us. Saying about the New Zealand flag being debated. So this was relatively recently. Thank you for bringing this up, Andy. This is good. And welcome back. I believe you've been here in previous weeks. There was a New Zealand flag referendum. And basically they got, so I think there's multiple votes, wasn't it? And people got to vote on which flag that they would potentially most like as a new flag, and then got to vote if they wanted to take on one of the new ones or to hold on to the same one, I think. So there was... But it ended with... Wait, how did this work? I can't remember how this worked at all. Oh, so there was a first referendum where people got to pick which was the... Yeah. So there was one referendum where people got to vote between 5 different flags, where they would vote for, if there was to be a new flag and it was one of these, which one would you prefer? And then got to vote between this one, the silver fern, and the current flag of New Zealand, to see which would they prefer to keep. I mean, a big part of that, I think, was the fact that it still had the Union Jack in it, I think I'm right in saying. And so it's very much like the flag of the colonizers. I didn't realise how close it was, because that is relatively close, isn't it? 56.73% to hold on to the current one of 40. That seems... Obviously, we had the Brexit vote, which was even closer, so that seems like a vast majority. But that is... that's interesting. Isn't that... Oh, do they use this one in... It's interesting, though. It was... Did the All Blacks use that one? Passports. The New Zealand rugby flag... What does that look like? I'd quite like to go to New Zealand, or to... I think I'd prefer to go to New Zealand than to Australia. It's just really far and really expensive from the UK, because it's the other side of the world. Oh, right, so the fern is similar. Oh, but I guess it can't be the exact kind of fern, because, that fern will be copyright of the rugby union. I don't know, whatever the rugby organisation is. And I'm sure they could charge an absolute fortune for it if the country itself wanted to buy it. Ketra saying, yes, some people were saying that the way they did the form weighted it away from people wanting a new flag, because if they wanted a new flag but didn't like the options, it could skew it. Yeah, that's true. That's true. A lot of talk about sort of social backlash at the moment, or sort of pushback. And it is. These are strange times to be living in. I mean, Sienna saying that the media in the UK seem to be obsessed with young people, trans people, and the wokes at the moment. I mean, a lot of it is the right getting into power in the UK, at least. The right getting into power, but I would say not really knowing what to do with it. Well, and so for the Conservative Party in the UK, they've now been in power for what? 11 years? Was it 2021? Yeah, so 11 years. So it's really, it gets to the point where for a long time they could blame the last government, and that they go like, oh, it's Labour's fault from when they were last in government. And after a while, that becomes sort of difficult to do. And so they have to like imagine a worldview where even though the Conservative Party and a relatively right-wing version of the Conservative Party have like a monopoly on state power in the UK, as well as like, and have used that power very well to make sure that all the other institutions like the BBC and all sorts of institutions are very much like on their side. They have to imagine a worldview where there is still something, there are still powers beyond them which have to be overcome. And so, my suggestion would be that is where the woke stuff, the sort of anti-woke stuff and cancel culture stuff and all that becomes useful in the UK, is that it gives them they can pretend that there is still all these like liberal elites around that are ruining the country, because they need something that is like a higher power, particularly because like Johnson's conservatism is like a populist conservatism which relies on him being the man of the people, etc., etc. And that's difficult when you've been in power for so long, because you actually, who do you blame for the fact that everyone that votes for you's lives have not got any better? Because you can't really blame anyone. Paul saying that I think there is always a limit to the pace of social change, as you have to move the majority opinion. That has happened with the attitude to homosexuality, partly because old people died, possibly to an extent. That it takes a while for people's attitudes to change, I guess. I thought gay conversion therapy was being like properly legally banned here, but I don't know to what extent it actually has been. I think it was potentially one of those where it wasn't like a specific policy commitment. It was like a sort of broad suggestion that they were going to do it without any like real deadline. And so it just says there's been a delay here. So it was in the Queen's speech. But yeah, it doesn't seem to have actually gone through. Oh, Sienna's saying that they announced banning it under the Theresa May's government. It still hasn't happened. Eric, hello Eric, thank you for joining us, is saying that they don't understand how UK people accept the monarchy. And yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I think that it's just been around for so long. I think like I am very anti us having a monarchy, and I think that it goes through real waves of popularity and unpopularity. I think the fact that our current queen has been queen for so long has had a big effect on things, because there's like a real personal attachment that a lot of people feel towards her. Like during like Diana and Charles getting divorced, it was really low like trust and belief in the monarchy being a good thing, partly due to like a gradual waning over the years, but also due to some of those particular events, but then in recent, like post Diana dying and stuff, somehow that sort of brought people more on board of the monarchy, and also I think there's something about the fact that like 50 years and 60 years and 70, like you get a lot of jubilees in quick succession as well, so you get a lot of things. Andy's saying it'd be very interesting if we get King Charles. I would recommend to anyone, there was initially a play and then got adapted into a TV drama on the BBC, maybe? Oh, well, PBS and something else. I'll put on a trailer quickly.
On Masterpiece.
How are you, Dad? For soon, he will be king.
Your father rules today.
It's like a sort of future narrative in which Prince Charles becomes king and it causes chaos.
This is perhaps the most unstable moment the royal family will face.
The Queen did not face laws like this to pass.
Refuse to sign. Provoke revolt.
You should have got it right.
King Charles III on Masterpiece.
Basically, so in the UK, any law that gets passed through Parliament then has to be like signed by the Queen, like signed into law by the Queen, or King if there is presently a king. And I think the sort of inciting incident of the play or then film is that Prince Charles like refuses to sign a law into sign a bill into law, and so it causes like a massive constitutional crisis. But there is some like interesting parallels in it, in that like Prince Harry decides to like leave the royal family and like renounces all his privileges, which has similarly happened. Sienna's saying, is it ironic or not? Like a little bit, and a little bit yes and a little bit no. You know, some of column A and some of column B, because it's like it's sort of done as a sort of mock Shakespeare thing, in that it's sort of, I think it's written in iambic pentameter, and it's sort of like a Shakespeare sort of history play, but done into the future. And so it's like a little bit tongue in cheek, a lot of it. Like it is a comedy. It's very much a comedy, and it's good fun. Navish's talking about the Tamils in Sri Lanka. I'm afraid that's just something I just don't know a huge amount about, and so the only thing that we'll get from me briefly doing a Google and doing like a react is some like bad internet content. I will go and do some looking up of that when we are done. But I'm afraid I don't know enough about the situation to want to like say something. Do you know what I mean? Just say something off the cuff. I don't think that helps anyone. I mean, Paul's saying that bear in mind that people voted for Boris, even if Charles is a buffoon, they may still love him. I mean, yeah, but I think he's just got bad vibes because there's all the history with like, well, to anyone who's just joining us, welcome to another live stream in which we do royal family gossip. But like, I think that whole history with like Princess Diana and then him marrying Camilla, who, he'd supposedly sort of been seeing while they were together. Like, people sort of don't like him, and also all his opinions are actually like, they're mostly like environment stuff. I think he's really big on, he thinks the climate emergency is real, and like, given that the like most of the voting age people in the UK are still like boomers, they don't want to hear about that. That's boring. So I think they've sort of got bad vibes about him, most people. But yeah, he is a real political meddler. But so is the Queen. Like they all, like, there's constantly reports about members of the royal family like interfering in, like, you know, the governance of the country, and like petitioning against certain laws getting passed. There was something. What was it? Queen, I don't know, interfering in politics. Let's put that. Here you go. The Queen lobbied for change in law to hide her private wealth. Like, there's all sorts of stories. I think Prince Charles, the spider memos, I think, because he writes with really spidery handwriting. Like, he's done quite a lot of interfering and writing letters to ministers and politicians suggesting certain laws should be passed or shouldn't be passed. So yeah, it's you know, the notion that monarchs the royal family don't interfere in politics is I mean, just not true, really. But there'll be a little bit more about ideas about national identity and monarchs, and, you know, in many ways, in terms of the development of ideas of the existence of nations and nationality and nationalism, very much comes in opposition to ideas of monarchy. I think the new video is going to be sort of good fun. It's sort of proper, as I was saying a lot earlier, for those of you that were here then, it's going to be a lot like, it's proper like old school What the Theory episode. It's been quite fun, but with some like new skills that I've picked up in terms of filming and editing. So hopefully everyone will learn a little bit from doing that. Ketch is saying, I wonder why the Queen's interference has been less widely known. I think because, I don't know, I think people don't care. I think generally, like, I don't really care. Yeah, see, like Sienna's saying, people don't want to hear it. Like, people have, like, it is very much vibes based. People have bad vibes about Prince Charles, who don't like him, and people have broadly good vibes from the Queen. Nivesh is saying that a new monarch won't have such power. I mean, but they sort of just do. Like, they do have a huge amount of... yeah, Eric's saying that they own, like, a huge amount of the UK land. Which I think a lot of it is, like, probably the Crown. Yeah, the Crown estate that owns it, rather than sort of the, like, Elizabeth II, if that makes sense, as an individual. So it's sort of stuff that's owned by the nation, but it's sort of not, because it's within the state. But I'm just trying to find out, like, what percentage of... I was just trying to find out what percentage of, like, the UK land it actually was. That is... How much land is owned by the royal family? 263 acres. Oh, and all common... That's interesting, that common land is... I guess that's true. Is probably technically owned by the Crown. Sienna's saying that she's excited for the new video. I'm so glad. Yeah, I'm really... It's been... I think I often say that my least favourite part of the... my process of making a video is the editing, because... you know, I enjoy the writing, and I feel like it's something that I'm broadly sort of... That's the part I feel is where my skills are, if I, you know, have any skills. the talking to the camera bit, I can do the talking bit okay, and I've sort of worked out sometimes how to film stuff well, and I generally have fun with like making sets or making or finding cool places to film. The editing is the bit where I'm I do my best, but I'm constantly like, I know someone with the skills to do this would be able to do this better than I can. But I've been really enjoying it this time around. I'm only 2 days into editing, so give me another week and I might be saying completely the opposite and being like, actually I'm totally bored of it now and I hate it, but who knows. I'll catch you saying this whole section about this new enclosure book. I'll check that out. I think we're gonna maybe wrap things up, I'm afraid, because my general rule of thumb is that I do somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. We've hit 2.5. But mostly I'm a little bit tired, a little bit need the loo, but don't want to do a 2-minute break and then only do 20 minutes more. But Paul's saying that even the Scottish National Party take care not to insult the Queen. That's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of like Scottish monarchists for various reasons. Oh, and Eric's saying my work's amazing. Oh, thank you. I try my best. And one of the things that I always say is that one of the things I really continue to really enjoy about making videos on YouTube is that whilst I'm really like proud of and sort of like humbled by the sort of great response that my videos have had and that people have enjoyed them, is that at the same time I really feel like there's a lot I can still get better at, and that's kind of exciting. It's like often exciting to know that like there is room to grow and to get better and to make stuff cooler, etc. Sienna saying it was a great stream. Oh, Ketra saying really enjoyed my video style. Thank you. That's really nice to see. Oh, right, Novicious is 2 a.m. Yes, go and get some. You can definitely go and get some sleep. I'm sure you've deserved that. Paul saying thank you. Sienna saying take as much time as I'm in need. I shouldn't be too far off now. And as I say, I don't know. There's something about the editing process which I've been really enjoying in a slightly different way this time. But thank you so much, everyone. It's been lovely 2.5 hours. But I will be back next. Oh yeah, so next week, same time, same place, 7 p.m. on a Thursday. I will be back, and I'll be joined by Sam from We're in Hell. So do come along for that. That should be good fun. I've not planned exactly what to do for that yet, but I think we might maybe watch some of his videos and chat a little bit about them. Maybe ask some questions. But we'll see. But it'll be good fun. It'll be fun having a guest. I need to get all this set up for having a guest rather than just for being me. But yeah, it's always lovely to have familiar faces. So thank you so much, everyone that's like put up with these for multiple weeks in a row. It's been lovely to chat as ever. And with that, I'm gonna bring the stream to a close. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and thank you, Shashank. It is. I'm glad that you also had a good time. Yeah. Anyone that's just been listening, I hope you've enjoyed some of this as well. But yeah. Don't play chess or something boring. Okay. Yeah. I mean, bring suggestions. If anyone's going to come along next week, then bring your suggestions. And maybe when the event goes up, the like stream gets scheduled or whatever, feel free to chuck them up then. But okay. Thank you, everyone, and ta-ra, and see you next week.